You're listening to the micro version of the Savage Lovecast at savage.love.
If you're stuck in a relationship quandary, or if you're looking for sexual harmony, well, there's nothing you can't ask on the Savage Lovecast.
I'm a Bad Sex Podcaster. Challengers, the new movie starring Zendaya, Mike Faist, and Josh O'Connor, opened on April 22nd, weeks ago now. And unlike every other sex writer or podcaster out there, I haven't seen it. I wanted to see this movie since I found out it was starring Mike Faist, who is the platonic ideal of the Muppet-faced man. The film was supposed to open way back in 2023 in the summer, but was delayed because of the writer's strike, and it is driving me crazy that I haven't been able to see it yet due to certain circumstances outside of my control. Challengers, of course, is about a love triangle between three insanely hot young tennis players, and as everyone knows by now, all right, we are going to pause here for what feels like an unnecessary spoiler alert. I don't even think the plot point I'm about to give away should count as a spoiler because it's everywhere. But just in case you haven't seen any of the billboards and you haven't watched any of the trailers or read any of the reviews or listened to any of the sex podcasts hosted by the sex podcasters who've done a better job in the last couple of weeks than I've managed to do, you're going to want to skip ahead. All right, so there is a scene early in Challengers where Faist's character and O'Connor's character, two up-and-coming young male tennis stars and rivals and best friends, still teenagers, invite Zendaya's character, a tennis prodigy, also a teenager, back to their hotel room. Nothing creepy or coercive about it. They are flirting, the three of them. It's before or after a big match. I don't know which. I haven't seen the movie yet. And the three of them wind up sitting next to each other on the end of a bed in their hotel room. And I'm going to let the Vulture's Alison Wilmore, who's seen Challengers twice, take it from here. The atmosphere is heady with lust and the efforts of the three teens trying to appear more sophisticated than they are when Tashi, that's Zendaya's character, Y2 Mama Tambien's Faist's and O'Connor's characters, kissing one, then the other, then guiding them into a lush group makeout that keeps going after she strategically withdraws. That cat got the cream grin that spreads across her face as she watches them kiss is that of a girl who's gotten people to show her aspects of themselves they might not even have been aware of. Or maybe a smile spreads across Tashi's face because she likes watching hot boys make out. I mean, it's not gay boys who are buying all that boy love manga or writing most of it. It's straight girls. A girl wrote Heartstopper. Most of the people who are obsessed with Heartstopper and watching Heartstopper are girls. Maybe Tashi, as portrayed by Zendaya, is one of those teenage girls who likes watching hot boys kiss. Now, more than one thing could be happening in Tashi's head while she watches Mike and Josh make out. So maybe, in addition to guiding them on an Y2 Mama Tambien-esque journey of self-discovery, Tashi's enjoying the show. And I gotta hand it to this fictional character, getting the M's at the MFM threesome to make out with each other is a power move on the part of the F at the MFM threesome. A power move that shall henceforth be known as a Zendaya, and power is, as a terrible person once said, the ultimate aphrodisiac. So, when I finally get to see this movie later this week, I will be disappointed if all I see on Tashi's face at that moment is the satisfaction of helping these two boys discover something about themselves, because that's so boring. One thing I'm pre-disappointed about, and this is definitely a spoiler, skip ahead if you haven't seen the movie yet. I saw this spoiler in more than one headline, and I am equal parts annoyed at having this spoiled for me and disappointed that director Luca Guadagnino didn't have the balls to go there. The threesome, teased in trailers and talked about everywhere, spoiler alert, that threesome doesn't happen. As is almost always the case in mainstream films, the leads, the characters audiences are meant to identify with and root for, they think about doing something crazy. They almost have a crazy sexual adventure. They tiptoe up to that line and then step back. Gotta say, I expected more from the director of Call Me By Your Name. Also disappointed by challengers, Mike Cahill, writing in The Guardian, who called out the box office smash for being a tease. The sex is performative and cutesy, McCahill writes. Less sex scenes than exaggerated makeout sessions, kids playing Spin the Racket. Challenger's punning title is also positioning, a play to be considered major and transgressive in what it depicts. But another title suggests itself, Balls. We're all familiar with this kind of bait and switch in big movies. A mainstream Hollywood film titillates us with the possibility of something truly sexually transgressive going down, and then chickens out. So this is just another big Hollywood film that wants us to think a sexual norm, the norm of one person at a time sex, is going to be violated in a hotel room by three impossibly hot and charismatic young actors. And then, in a surprise move that no one could expect, except everyone probably should have expected, the norm winds up getting upheld. You know, there's this longing on the part of so many kinksters and so many people out there who practice various forms of non-monogamy to have our choices, to have our lifestyle choices normalized in mainstream films. But there's a risk to normalizing the transgressive, because when you normalize the transgressive, it's not transgressive anymore. And if transgressing against the norm is part of what makes that thing a turn on for you in the first place, and it almost always is part of what the turn on is about in the first place, normalizing the transgressive ruins it. So the fact that there's no threesome in this threesome movie, that choice in the end kind of helps keep threesomes transgressive. Like, I don't know, all those bumper stickers help keep Austin weird. And to be clear, having threesomes is transgressive, but thinking about them, that's not. Threesomes are the single most popular fantasy among adults. A majority of adults have fantasized about threesomes and group sex, according to sex researcher Justin Lee Miller. But most people, most people, like challengers, don't have the balls. All right, coming up on the micro, tons of your Qs, lots of my As, and on the Magnum Savage Lovecast that you can subscribe to at savage.love. More Qs, more As, more guests, no ads. TV writer Stan Zimmerman joins me to talk about his book, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, and then take some of your sex questions with me. If you're a Magnum sub, show starts now. If you are not yet a Magnum sub, show starts right after these ads. This episode is brought to you by Talkspace, therapy made easy. Get $80 off your first month when you go to Talkspace.com/savage and enter promo code SPACE80. This episode is sponsored by Hims, affordable access to ED treatment all online. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/savage. Support for today's show, support we are very grateful for, comes from Stamps.com. With Stamps.com, you can access all the amazing services of the post office right from your desk in your own home, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just click, print, mail, and you are done. It could not be easier. And right now, use Savage for this special offer. Includes up to $55 worth of free postage, a digital scale, and a 4-week trial. Do not wait. Go to Stamps.com, and before you do anything else, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Savage. That's Stamps.com. Enter SAVAGE.
Hey, Dan, Nancy, and the technologically shrewd youth in peril. Got a question for you. I'm a mid-30s bi guy in a small town in Western Canada. We had a birthday party for my fiance recently at our house. It was a sweaty dance party. Everyone's in our undies, just having a great time. Party's starting to wind down. The only people who are left are my fiance, her ex-boyfriend, and myself. We're chatting for a bit, and I get up to go put my clothes on and clean the kitchen, and he's like, whoa, hold the phone. Don't put your pants on. I want to suck your dick. I'm taken off guard. I didn't know this guy was queer, but I don't get much dick in the small town, so I was like, oh, this could be really fun. Nice to play as a group. But do some check-ins about his agreements, like what's going on with your partner. It's very explicit. Like, I've been thinking about this for about a week. I'm really looking forward to propositioning you. And I'm totally okay to have any queer connections, but I shouldn't connect with your fiance at all. So we have sex. My fiance's watching. Good time for all of us. Next morning, we text to check in how he's doing and how the conversation went with his partner. And then just a few minutes later, we get a call from his very angry partner who's feeling betrayed. She's like, there was no agreement. This is totally not okay. Feeling super hurt. And she's friends with my fiance. Actually, when this guy was with my fiance 6 years ago, he actually cheated on my fiance with his current partner. But since they've repaired and it's been all good, but he does have this history of lying. And so he lied to us all, deceived us so he could get what he wants. So we're all feeling hurt, but particularly his partner. And we're just wondering how to navigate this. And like, do we have some blind spots here? Like, he was very explicit what his agreements were, and we followed them, but he was lying to us all. And now the relationship between my fiance and his partner is compromised, and my partner is feeling really hurt about this because the friendship's important to her. Anyway, Dan, what advice do you have? How should we navigate this? Should we just shoulder the weight of this woman's anger because this guy doesn't have the emotional intelligence and they live together and, there's not enough place for her anger to go? Or what communication should we have, or how should we hold this?
What did his girlfriend know, and when did she know it? You say this guy used to be your fiance's boyfriend, and he cheated on your fiance with his current girlfriend, cheated on your fiance when she was his girl. This is so complicated. It's such a small town. Need a diagram here to keep track of everyone who's fucking around on everyone here. Did the girl that he's with now know that when he first slept with her, he was cheating on his then girlfriend, your current fiance? If she didn't know it when it happened, she found out eventually. So she knew that he was capable of lying to get his dick sucked, or in this case, to get to suck a dick. You and your fiance knew that when he told you that he had an agreement from his current girlfriend, you knew he was capable of lying because he'd already lied to your fiance back when she was his girlfriend. All right, well, how much screw diligence are you expected to do? Were you expected to get his current girlfriend on the phone and make sure this was okay for her? Or could you take him at his word? Well, all right, you took him at his word, and yet what he told you was it was all right for him to have sex with another guy, to do something queer, so long as no women were involved, particularly his ex-girlfriend, your current fiance. And you say you honored the agreement that you thought he had with his current girlfriend. You fucked around with him, and your fiance watched. I'm sorry, that's involvement. Like, that's voyeurism, which is a bank shot sex act. So maybe you felt you were within the letter of the law because he didn't touch your fiance, his ex-girlfriend. But yeah, like nobody covered themselves with glory here. He's a liar who tells lies occasionally to have sex with people that he wants to have sex with. You knew that about him. Your fiance knew that about him from bitter personal past experience. And his current girlfriend knew that about him because the first time they fucked around, he was cheating on somebody else, which I assume that she found out at some point. Who should shoulder the weight of this woman's anger? Well, clearly him. He's the one who ran around lying to people. In the moment, you maybe suspended your disbelief and you didn't factor in the history that you have with this guy, the history your fiance has with this guy, and his known capacity to lie to people that he wants to have sex with. And maybe you should have kicked the blowjob down the road just a little bit to make sure, by doubling back the next morning or the next day and checking with his current girlfriend about whether this was actually okay with her. And you could avoid some of the anger being heaped onto your shoulders. But if there's anyone that this woman should really be mad at, it's him. It's her boyfriend. And I'm sorry, some of the anger that she's projecting on you is without a doubt anger that should be directing at herself or is feeling angry at herself, and she's just pushing that out by dumping that anger all over you because she knew when she got together with this guy that he was a liar and a cheat because he'd lied and cheated with her at the start of their relationship. Like I said, nobody involved here covered themselves with glory. But when it comes to how to divide up the anger here, I'd say 80% of everyone's anger should be directed at him for being the liar, for once again proving himself to be the liar you all knew him to be. 10% of the anger should be on the girlfriend's part and your fiance's part, directed inward because you took a liar's word for it because you wanted to fuck his face. And the other 10%, I think, can reasonably be directed at the two of you together by the girlfriend, because even if that was the agreement that they had and it wasn't the agreement he told you that they had, you violated it, at least in spirit, by fucking around in front of your fiance. Man, that was complicated.
Hey, Dan. I'm a 36-year-old cis woman, and over the years, I've been off and on the dating apps. I've recently explored my sexuality, and at this time, I'm primarily interested in dating cis-het men. Yikes, it's been rough. I finally met someone who seemed shockingly emotionally intelligent and available, nerdy in an endearing way, very present, and capable of holding interesting conversations. He's funny, too. I've tried taking it slow with him, and after, like, a couple of weeks, I mean, literally 2, of flirty voice memos and text exchanges, we've both, like, really enjoyed going out on 3 or 4 dates. Then he told me very casually that he has a sex doll. In the moment, I was truly shocked and asked a few questions, but not too many. And I definitely compartmentalized it until I could leave his home and process it. When I left it really disturbed me. My question is owning a sex doll ever really okay? He spent $1,000 on it, and I'm struggling to trust that he's used it in the ways he's described it, like the function in his life. This is a 35-year-old male who has been in a long-term relationship. He's also explored his sexuality, and he says that he hasn't used it in 6 months, but it's in his closet. I should also mention his house was pretty dirty. He lives with a couple of other guys. There weren't really signs of cleaning products. There wasn't really a self-awareness around that. So I can only imagine that this doll is in a bad state, having been used. Please help a girl make sense of this. I hate to judge or shame anyone sexually, but, like, why not start with a fleshlight?
Well, I think the obvious course of action here is to kidnap your boyfriend's sex doll and go on a cross-country road trip adventure with her, especially if she starts talking to you. That's the plot of Dummy with Anna Kendrick, which was a show on Quibi. It was the only reason anybody downloaded or got on Quibi was to watch it. It was actually pretty fucking good, and I really enjoyed it, and it's not relevant to your problem here. And I don't think your problem really is the sex doll. I think the bigger problem here is that he lives in a filthy house with 2 other guys or a few other guys and no cleaning products. That's what you're signing up for if you wind up in a relationship with this guy. All right, he's got a sex toy that kind of weirds you out, and that some people would read into the purchase of this sex toy some discomfort with women or some desire for women to be inanimate objects. I don't think that's entirely fair. Like, a sex doll is just, as you kind of hint at the end, a giant fleshlight. It's a fleshlight with some fake ass plastic tits attached to it and a face to stare into, so you don't have to imagine the face. I wouldn't, if I dated a guy and I went into his apartment and it was a filthy fucking wreck, and then I found a life-size sex doll, I would be a little squicked out by the sex doll, but I would be a lot more squicked out by the fucking mess. What that communicates about the guy is that he can't take care of himself. And in his search for a partner or search for a mate, he's looking for someone to take care of him. Or that person by default is going to wind up being the one who has to wipe his ass and clean his sex doll's vagina, which is part of what happens in Dummy with Anna Kendrick on Quibi. If you want to watch it, it might put your problems into perspective. At least Anna Kendrick's boyfriend in Dummy, who's based on Dan Harmon, the TV writer who actually did have a sex doll that his girlfriend found out about, at least his house, his apartment, house, I think it was a house, was nice and clean. So everybody that you might get with sexually, everybody that you might date is probably going to have some corners of their erotic imagination or their sexual history that if you stumbled over evidence of their past sexual acts or interests or private thoughts or fantasies or hidden sex toys might weird you out a little bit, might make you wonder what the fuck was up with that. Ideally, the thing that your partner has or is hidden from you or isn't terribly proud of is nothing illegal, nothing going to come back to bite them on the ass, but maybe something that in the moment felt right to them, like blowing $1,000 on a sex doll, which is actually pretty cheap for a life-size sex doll, I gotta say. I've heard those things run $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 typically. And you're not going to be able to solve it or solve for it. You're just going to have to accept it, accept his explanation. And if it's a condition of continuing to date or move in together, getting rid of it, which isn't easy because it is a little bit like getting rid of a body and it might look suspicious. The belief that a lot of people have about the kinds of men who own sex dolls, that they don't see women as individuals with agency and desires and needs and complex inner lives. They see women as objects. Okay, maybe the fact that he owns this sex doll proves that about him, but I don't think it follows that anybody who owns a sex doll, all of that is true about, and only in your interactions with him. How he treats you, not how he treats this inanimate object that he jacked off into, will you know for sure whether he feels that you're an individual with agency and needs and a complex inner life, or if he feels that you're an object or a potential housemaid. And if he treats you like an object, it's irrelevant whether he owned a sex doll or not. There's plenty of guys out there who treat women like objects who did not own sex dolls. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there are guys out there who've owned sex dolls and other insertion toys, which is what a sex doll is. It's just a very large insertion toy, who do not see women as objects. And this guy could be one of those guys, but only time will tell. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, is encouraging people to talk it out in therapy. Opening up to a therapist might feel uncomfortable, cathartic, exhausting, or exhilarating, but one thing's certain. If you keep talking or texting with a licensed therapist, you'll gain insights and uncover truths that you can only find in therapy. This is why I recommend therapy all the time on this show. Get those personal breakthroughs and judgment-free support by signing up for Talkspace. At Talkspace.com, you can sign up online and get a personalized match with a provider that's right for you, typically within 48 hours. It's incredibly convenient to have virtual sessions with your licensed therapist from the comfort of your home. No need to commute to appointments, you won't miss time at work or have to line up childcare in order to attend your sessions. It's mental health care made easy. Talkspace lets you send messages to your therapist so you don't have to wait for your next session. And Talkspace is affordable and in-network with most major insurers. To celebrate May, Mental Health Awareness Month, and the power of talking it out in therapy, Talkspace is offering every listener of this podcast $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com/savage. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/savage. And to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show, but more importantly, show your support for yourself, use the code SPACE80 again to get $80 off your first month at Talkspace. That's Talkspace.com/savage, code SPACE80.
Hi, Dan. I'm 35. I'm in a mostly monogamous relationship for about a year and a half now. My partner won't go down on me or really engage in any foreplay at all when we have sex, which is pretty much, PIV sex exclusively. Recently, one of my friends started flirting with me over text message and sent me this recording basically describing going down on me, which I thought was really hot. But now I feel like I've maybe crossed a line here. I didn't send anything back, but I have been enjoying that message and thinking about what it would be like to have that in my life again. So is this cheating?
No, this is not cheating, which is not to say I don't think that you should cheat on your boyfriend. I definitely think you should cheat on your boyfriend if that's the only way to get yourself out of this relationship. If you getting caught cheating gets you out of this relationship, I definitely think you should go and cheat. And listening to a voicemail from somebody who's flirting with you, who's apparently willing to do things that your, I'm sorry, shitty, inconsiderate, selfish, awful boyfriend isn't willing to do, like foreplay, like eating your pussy. Yeah, you should listen to that message every goddamn day so that it inspires you, if you want to do it the right way, to end your relationship, to break the fuck up with your boyfriend who is using you like a sex doll. You say that he's not into foreplay, doesn't eat your pussy. So when you do have sex, it's sex exclusively. You're defining sex there as PIV. And if you're a listener of this program, you know that sex isn't PIV and PIV isn't sex. Penis and vagina is great. But if that is all your partner will do with and for you, then your partner is using you like a fleshlight, using you like a life-size sex doll that he bought for $1,000. No. You need to get out of this relationship. You can't have a sexually exclusive relationship with somebody who is so lousy at sex and selfish and inconsiderate. Break the fuck up with him and date this person. Go see your friend who wants to eat your pussy and get your pussy ate. Yeah, you should do it right. You should end this relationship, then go get your pussy ate by somebody who wants to eat your pussy. But if you can't see yourself ending this relationship, then I'm just going to be Mr. Bad Advice here and encourage you to go fucking actually cheat in the hopes that getting some decent sex inspires you to end this fucking relationship, that it highlights the contradictions here. It throws into stark relief what sex could be with a caring, giving partner who is invested in your pleasure versus what sex is with the partner that you have now, which sounds terrible and lousy and one-sided. You are being jacked off inside. You are not actually having sex with someone. You are being used. Get the fuck out of this relationship. And I'm not wishing that you cheat and you get caught, because the kind of guy who would use a woman the way your boyfriend is using you is the kind of guy who is likelier to react with scary anger and perhaps violence if he finds out his girlfriend cheated on him. So I'm walking it back here. Break the fuck up with this guy and then go put your pussy in front of your friend who wants to eat your pussy and let him eat your pussy. Get your pussy ate. Get the fuck out of this relationship. Break up with this guy. Sex is not PIV exclusively, and you've been putting up with that kind of sex and being used in the way that you're being used right now for far too long. DTMFA. I hear all the time from men and the people who love them that they have erectile dysfunction, but they either don't have the time or don't want to deal with the hassle of going to see a doctor and getting it treated. Your sex life is important. Fortunately, through HIMS, now you can get treated for ED without stepping foot outside your door. HIMS is changing men's healthcare by providing access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. HIMS provides access to doctor-trusted ED treatment options such as chewable hard mints, brand name treatments like Viagra, or generic alternatives for up to 95% cheaper. The process is simple and 100% online. No uncomfortable visits to the doctor's office. Answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships to you for free. No insurance is needed. If ED is getting you down, it's time you join the hundreds of thousands of trusted HIMS subscribers and get treated. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/savage. That's HIMS.com/savage for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/savage. Hard mints are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey, Dan. I'm a gay man, age 64, and recently I've been getting hit on, sometimes pretty aggressively, by guys in their early 20s to early 30s. What's going on? My theory is I represent something, and in my mind, maybe they perceive me as stable, and they're at ages where things are kind of chaotic in life, figuring things out, and they want an anchor to hold on to. I don't know if there's anything else going on or what your thoughts are.
I'm old enough to remember when all the guys in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s complained that the guys in their 20s and early 30s weren't into them. Ageism, that you'd go to a bar, you were 40, 50 years old, and you would feel invisible because none of the hot guys hot here to find, and I object to this definition as guys in their 20s and early 30s, we're interested. Now we live at a time where daddies have a certain erotic purchase, a kind of currency. There's an appreciation for older guys and daddies there didn't used to be. And there are guys out there, daddies out there, who don't feel the least bit conflicted about soaking up that attention. And there are guys like you who are like, what the fuck is this about? What is going on here? They're into you. They're attracted to you. Do they want an anchor to hold on to? Maybe some of these younger guys just want to suck the wisdom and experience out of you, like sucking the marrow out of your bones. There's probably one or two in the mix who look at you and think, oh, there's somebody who, if I put out, might pay my fucking rent. You will figure out pretty quickly if there's a guy who's pretending to be interested in you because they only want you to pay their rent versus a guy who says that he's interested in you and then sucks your dick like he fucking means it. So look, if you're into some of the guys who are into you and hopefully also into some of the guys who are your age or close or maybe a little older, date around, date broadly if you're single or if you're in an ethically non-monogamous relationship and you're allowed to dally and have experiences. But gotta say, we have this prejudice in our heads that sex is for not pleasure, not intimacy, not connection. Sex is for forging long-term relationships. And the deck is stacked against you forming a long-term relationship at 64 with a guy who's 24, although LTRs have happened for guys in their 20s and guys in their 40s or 50s. What's likelier to happen here is a kind of short-term relationship where if you're honoring the campsite rule, and so is he, where you're both endeavoring to leave each other in better shape than you found each other, and you with your balls drained and him with his balls drained too, or his ass filled, that something beautiful and meaningful and emotionally satisfying and even important can come of these connections that you might make with younger men, even if a long-term relationship doesn't necessarily come from the connection you might make with a younger man. So I would just encourage you to say yes and be open to possibility and open to the kind of connections that you might have with guys who 40 years ago wouldn't have given a guy who is in his 50s or 60s a second look or a second chance, and stop asking the universe why. Just get out there and enjoy. And if something feels good and feels healthy and feels like it's coming from a good place and it feels like functional and rewarding, lean into it for however long it lasts. It may only last a night. The guy just might want to have that experience, scratch daddy off his fuck it list, and then move back on to somebody closer to his own age. Or you might wind up with a summer romance, or you might wind up with somebody who wants to be there for you, be there with you for the rest of your life. You just never know. You never know. But it can't happen. Nothing happens if you just sit there in your apartment looking at your phone, wondering why this person who's hitting on you is hitting on you. Go meet up with them, and you'll soon find out. I can't imagine what it must be like to run a small business. Making every big and small decision has to take its toll. But if you have a lot of mailing and shipping to do, Stamps.com is an obvious and easy choice. It streamlines your processes and makes your business more efficient, freeing you up to focus on, yes, all the other decisions you have to make, big and small. The Stamps.com mobile app is like having a post office in your pocket. Wherever you are, the post office is. All you need is a computer and a printer. They even send you a free scale. You can mail checks, invoices, legal documents, books, and everything you need to keep your business running. Seamlessly connect with every major marketplace and shopping cart if you sell online. Access to the USPS and USPS right from your computer or phone anytime, day or night. No lines, no traffic, no waiting. And you'll get rates you can't find anywhere else, like to 89% off USPS and UPS. Order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, and even printers from the supply store when you run low. Make the same no-brainer decision, an easy one, but a big one, same one a million other businesses have made by going with Stamps.com. Sign up with promo code SAVAGE for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code SAVAGE.
Hello, I have a fantasy that has been very consistent since the age of 6 until now, and that's 71 years. When I reached puberty, I began to masturbate and fantasize that I was a very weak boy, unable to prevent aggressive girls from having sex with me. Later, I became a girl in my fantasies, about the age of 20, being fondled by other girls. Usually, I'd be too weak to walk or climb stairs, so my partner would have to carry me around. Usually, my partner was loving, but I've also fantasized being beaten up, sometimes as a very weak man. I'm attracted to women, but this fantasy gets in the way of enjoying normal sex and ruined my marriage. Lately, I've been fantasizing that I'd like to be female. I'd love to know if anybody else feels this way, particularly women, but I've never found anyone who enjoys that.
There are a lot of people out there who fantasize about being weak or helpless or unable to resist, while an older person or a more powerful person takes advantage of them. I listened to your call a couple of times just to make sure that you weren't talking about, this wasn't an age play fantasy where you're fantasizing about being a little girl or a little boy who's being molested by other girls or boys or adults, that you've just fantasized about being weak and unable to resist your initial fantasies, while more powerful girls took advantage of you. And while that's a kind of very specific fantasy scenario, the erotic themes that inform your very specific fantasy scenario are really common. There are a lot of people out there who fantasize about being overpowered, about being ravished, about being helpless. You have a kind of shared erotic genome with people who are into power exchange, with people who are into bondage, with people who are into being ordered around or controlled. And that is so freaking common. It's just the way that it was expressed in your erotic imagination is unique. This sort of physical helplessness and weakness and inability to resist in the moment as you are fondled and molested by more powerful women. Common. Something I'm sure that would freak out somebody who is vanilla, somebody who didn't see that kind of fantasy coming or wasn't willing to put in the kind of thought where they might be able to wrap their minds around what it is that your fantasy means and symbolizes. There is a place a lot of us go in our erotic imaginations where there are sex acts we want to experience, there are things we want to do, and yet there's so much shame attached to sex and stigma attached to people who are perverts, who want sex, who go for sex, that we want someone to come along who does to us the things we want done to us without us having to ask. And at some point in puberty, you latched onto, your erotic imagination seized onto this notion that the way to get the sex that you want without the guilt that might come packaged with it or the complicity was not for you to go out there and try to do it or ask for it, but just to be borne along, swept along by someone who was doing to you magically and by coincidence the things you wanted done to you. You wanted to be fondled and groped and molested by girls. You were a boy. Now you're a man and you want to be fondled by women and taken without having to ask for and without having any control in the moment, because then you are alleviated of all responsibility for the sex acts, the horrible, terrible, dirty sex acts that happen as a result of it. It's perfectly understandable. But it sounds like what you're asking is whether there's a lid out there somewhere, or there was a lid or two out there somewhere for your very specific pot. And there might have been a woman out there who coincidentally, there's 4 billion women on the planet. There have been billions of women who've lived and died. There might have been a woman, or still be a woman out there, who has fantasized about having a man utterly powerless, in her control, that she can do anything she wants to, including beat. A lot of women who have those kinds of fantasies, they're expressed not in this kind of the way you would express it. Really, your fantasy is a very simple version of, some woman who's into bondage and S&M who wants a man hogtied at her feet that she can do whatever the fuck she wants to with. Those women are out there, as I'm sure you know. And I hope you, even if this fantasy or its discovery or revelation ruined your marriage, I hope you've acted on it at some point, or you screw up the nerve to act on it before you die. Because there are certainly sex workers out there. If you said to them, I've always fantasized about being a helpless, weak man, overpowered by a more powerful woman or women, even cross-dressed in that moment, even in that moment turned into a woman myself, which I'm not endorsing this fantasy in this way, but for some men, that fantasy about becoming a woman is the ultimate kind of powerlessness, because they perceive, because it's been pounded into their heads, or our heads all our lives, of women as weaker. And that's your fantasy. You always wanted to be the weaker one. And maybe now at this stage of your life, your fantasies have progressed to a point where the ultimate expression of your fantasy of weakness, and this is sexist and misogynistic, and I'm not blaming you for it. I think the culture put this somewhere into your reptile brain. The ultimate expression of that particular kind of sexual weakness and helplessness is to be a woman. I understand it. I get it. I think if you had gone to a sex worker instead of a spouse and laid that out, you might have gotten a more positive reception and gotten to act on this once or twice before you die. And you know what? 76-year-old person with a lifelong fantasy, there's still time. Higher, 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 higher.
Hi, Dan. White, cisgendered, bi, female, late 20s here. I don't know if you remember me. About a year ago, I called in about my boyfriend who refused to compromise on my want to model for fine art nude photography. Your advice at the time was to end the relationship, as I had said this was kind of a deal breaker. That was hard to comprehend, as we had been together for 3 years and our lives felt very intertwined. But about 3 months ago, I finally took the step after realizing there were a lot more controlling behaviors I was choosing to ignore, and differences in lifestyle preferences and long-term goals around kids versus career. The reason I'm calling now is that I'm still struggling with some aspects of this breakup. He felt very blindsided by it. He is now angry at me for not trying harder to communicate leading up to it. Or if I felt this way all along, he says, I should have ended it much sooner. I'm torn between feeling guilty about this, because I do feel he's partly right, and being angry that he's choosing to put all the blame on me. I feel that I was very transparent about my desires around my career goals and children all along, and he could have left sooner if he'd been rational about it. I feel like I did the best I could. Now that I have had some reflection time and I'm not in the thick of all the emotion of just wanting out of the relationship, I can see a lot more clearly how we don't make sense, and I'm afraid he's just stewing on this narrative he's created for himself. And I want to contact him and explain more and listen more and, I don't know, process, I guess, in the interest of trying to leave people better off than when you found them. But he's made it pretty clear he doesn't want any communication. I don't know what to do, Dan. I find myself ruminating on this debate daily, and it's interfering with my ability to focus on other things. What do you think?
Does it matter what I think? Your ex-boyfriend doesn't want to talk to you right now. So your only option here, regardless of what I might think, is to shut up and go away. Leave him the fuck alone. Write it all down. Get it all out. Stuff it in a bottle. Throw it in the ocean. Maybe he'll find that bottle on a beach in 20 or 30 years and he can sit down and have a good think. But right now, there's nothing you can do about it. Process on your own. Let him do what he's going to do right now, which is process on his own. You can't impose your process on him. You can't subpoena him and drag him into court and require him to sit and listen to you talk about why the relationship ended, even if it might be in his own best interest, even if you think it might help him, even if you think it would be something that if you could do it, it would leave him in better shape than you found him. Right now, he does not want to talk with you about it. And there's nothing you can do or say that'll change that in the immediate future. And there's nothing I can do or say that'll change that in the immediate future. Sometimes you got to let people fuck the fuck off because that's what or sometimes you've got to fuck the fuck off because that's what they asked you to do. And you have to respect that. And then if you're meant to have this conversation, if there's something that he needs to hear from you, if there's a discussion that you two might have that would be healing for him, maybe in 6 months or a year or 2 years, he'll reach out and you'll be able to have that conversation. Maybe you'll run into each other in an airport bar in 3 years and you'll be able to have that conversation. Just because you can't have it right now doesn't mean you'll never be able to have this conversation. And don't assume that you know something that he might not in time be able to tease out and work out for himself. So the gift that you want to give him of the right word or phrase or framing of your breakup, don't assume that's not an insight that in the end, as he processes this on his own, he might not ultimately have. Sitting alone by himself, without the benefit of your company or hearing it from you in time, he might have that insight for himself. Comfort yourself with that thought because you have no choice right now but to fuck the fuck off. All right, time for some listener feedback. First up, a few comments about last week's show posted at savage.love. Says Happy Hubby, regarding the woman who had a body count around 40, her boyfriend is allowing his insecurities to cause him to miss the big win here. She's smart, wise, and knows herself. She's had plenty of experience and knows exactly what she likes, doesn't like, and understands her own body very well. She had all of that, and dude, she chose you. Take the win. Says Ken K about the woman who decided to get her tubes tied. Dan, you are asking the boyfriend to get in the closet with his girlfriend. You suggested he lie by omission to his own mother, saying it's too early to talk about that with you. What happens 5 years later when they're married and don't have kids and mom asks? Don't you think that leads to a lot of trouble between mother and son down the road? Well, clearly at some point between just getting to know each other, dating, not yet engaged, and married for 5 years, that kid would need to have a conversation with his mother. But less than a year in, remember, he didn't just talk with his mommy about it. He blabbed with all of his friends who then turned around and blabbed back to his girlfriend about her private medical choices. That was not okay. Mom needs to know maybe at some point before they get serious, but they are not yet serious, and mom does not need to know now. Says Dizzy Jazzy Jane, I don't think the sex habits of the younger generation deserve this amount of hand-wringing. When I was growing up in the 2000s and 2010s, we had moral panic over hookup culture. Young adults then were having too much sex, and particularly too much casual sex. Now young adults aren't having enough sex, and it's a huge concern. When were people ever having the right amount of sex? Exactly. All right, for more written comments from my listeners and more of my responses, check out Struggle Session, a weekly bonus column for Magnum subs, which goes up every Thursday at savage.love. It is the only place on the internet where you will find the Muppet-faced Man of the Week. And yes, Mike Faced was the Muppet-faced Man of the Week back in April of last year. And now, listener response calls.
Oh my god, girl, literally no, 40 is not that big a number. I have a list, I just checked it. 35 people, I'm 28, you got 10 years on me. I honestly feel like I was going slow. I wish I had a few more under my belt. And fuck this guy, Dan's right. If he keeps using it, if you're feeling shame from it, if he keeps coming back to it, get out, bad news, abort, bad news, get out, fuck this guy.
Hi Dan, this is an episode for the caller in episode 914 who asked a question about her boyfriend having a sugar mommy arrangement. I think your answer honestly was not that helpful. You were quite blamey and shamey towards the questioner. I think it's because you managed to miss a huge part of the information in the question, which was that her boyfriend had kept his sugar mommy arrangement secret for 9 months. 9 months of their so far 1 year long relationship. He started the relationship not disclosing that information, therefore making the caller, I think, feel quite betrayed. There's already a lack of trust there, and so she did what many people do when there is a lack of trust, when there is a fear of deceit and betrayal. She checked his phone. Is it perfect behavior? Absolutely not. Is it something many of us have done when we suspect that trust is being broken? Absolutely, yes. I agree with you that perhaps this is not the right relationship, this is not the right partner for the caller, and yet, how could we know? Because the relationship was not started in an honest way. You talk so often about disclosure on the Savage Lovecast, and yet you manage to completely miss out the fact that the original sin here is that the boyfriend should have disclosed that he had a sugar mummy from the off.
This is in response to the gentleman who called hemming and hawing about whether he should ask out the woman who he sort of works in the same place with. Dan, you told him to ask her if she would like to go on a date sometime. In my opinion, that is an absolute nightmare to ask someone that question. It just puts a lot of pressure on. This is the way that I like to ask people out, okay? I come up with a thing to do and then invite them to accompany me to that thing. Like, make it about going to a thing instead. Like, I'm going to this show. Would you like to come along? Or, dude, there's this party that I'm going to. My friend's in town, and we're going to have a party. Would you like to come? That way, it, like, takes the pressure off, and then you can gauge their reaction to the invitation and then adjust your approach accordingly. If they say, oh, I'm busy that night, sorry, then, that's kind of like, ooh, maybe they weren't so happy about that invitation. But if they say, oh, gee, I'm busy that night, but, like, thanks so much for the invitation, I'd really love to go to something like that sometime, then there you go. And it's rainbows and gangbusters and rainbows, or whatever you say.
And we're going to leave it there. We've got 3 great ways for you to get us your questions or your comments for future shows. You can record your question or your comment at savage.love/askdan, or you can make a voice memo on your own phone and email us your question or your comment to q@savage.love, or you can call us on our landline and leave us a message at 206-302-2064. Hump 2024 Part 1, banned in British Columbia, not banned in Amsterdam, Chicago, Atlanta, Sacramento, and Kansas City, Missouri, where Hump 2024 Part 1 will be playing this weekend. To get your tickets to one of those screenings or to find out when Hump 2024 Part 1 is coming to a city near you, go to humpfilmfest.com. Go to humpfilmfest.com. Get tickets so you can see Hump the way it was meant to be seen in a theater and watch porn the way your grandparents did, sitting next to strangers in the dark. humpfilmfest.com. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at Dan Savage. Follow me on Blue Sky at Dan Savage. And you can still find me at the bad place at Fake Dan Savage. Follow Stan Zimmerman on Instagram and Threads at ZimmermanStan. His book, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, is out now. The Savage Lovecast is produced every week by Nancy Hartunian, and me and the tech-savvy at-risk youth and Nancy will all be back at you next week with another installment of the Savage Lovecast. Thank you for downloading.